Mauro Ranallo here at the UFC Fan Expo in Toronto with none other than the fearless leader of the Figure 4 Weekly Empire, Bryan Alvarez. Finally in person, my man.
That's right, how you doing?
You're a lot bigger than I thought you'd be.
You're the only person that's ever told me that. Most people tell me you sound bigger on the radio. You're really small in real life.
Obviously, coming from the pro wrestling world like we both do, I mean, isn't this like a WrestleMania weekend feel, this event in Toronto?
I've actually never been to Fan Access.
Oh, wow.
I've been to WrestleMania the last 4 or 5 years in a row. I've never been to Access.
Well, what do you think about this then in Toronto?
These are pretty awesome. These are always a fun time.
Why do you think, and I mean, again, I know even on your radio shows and the newsletters that you and Dave Meltzer do, there is that divide, pro wrestling and MMA. Do you think it's becoming easier? Do you think MMA is beginning to accept those fans who have also followed pro wrestling and get the one is entertainment and the other one is real but also entertainment?
It is certainly more than it was about 5 years ago. Like 5 years ago, I did notice that like pro wrestling fans are very accepting of MMA.
Yes,
MMA fans, not so accepting of pro wrestling.
And not that accepting of pro wrestling announcers either, Bryan.
No, of course not. No, but it is starting to change, because I think people are starting to realize that, it's okay that, this pro wrestling thing is one thing, this MMA thing is another. There's not going to be this deal where like MMA matches start being worked if Brock Lesnar shows up. I think people are starting to understand it's not so big a deal to be able to support both.
And Dana White is not at all like Vince McMahon.
Oh, he is. I think even he'd admit that a little bit. He is.
What do you think about 55,000 fans in Toronto? Why Canada? I mean, we've talked about pro wrestling and you writing the newsletter, knowing that Canada's always been a big supporter of pro wrestling. Why do you think now that this country is becoming one of the biggest markets for MMA?
I think it's because, as most people are saying, like a lot of the old pro wrestling fans are disgruntled with wrestling nowadays, and there's no other promotion to move on to if you don't like WWE. Like, TNA is what it is, but it's at a certain level. So if you're not a fan of WWE, you're not going to go to TNA, you're going to go to UFC. And I mean, among my friends, we used to have these huge pay-per-view parties for pro wrestling. I can't get anybody over, But for MMA shows, I mean, the place is packed. And it's all the same people. They've just moved on to mixed martial arts.
What about the main event on Saturday night, GSP against Jake Shields? A lot of people, of course, not giving Shields much of an opportunity. I myself am going with GSP via third or fourth round stoppage. I know it's almost impossible to stop Jake Shields. He's won 15 in a row. I really think this is going to be decided in the stand-up where GSP is just at another level compared to Shields.
I see this going similar to the way the Henderson fight went. I was actually surprised. There are a lot of people that are picking Jake Shields, more than I expected.
And it's interesting you say that, because at the press conference, he was actually cheered, not all that much booing, and I guess that also speaks to the knowledgeable fan base here.
Well, you're gonna get a different fan base here than you're gonna get when there's 55,000 fans in the building. I mean, I expect Jake Shields to have a rough time tomorrow night.
What about So what do you see then? Do you see Shields or GSP?
Oh, I see GSP. Yeah.
And how?
I look at Shields' recent fights. Everyone talks about the Henderson fight. He beat Dan Henderson. Dan Henderson killed him in that first round, and then Dan Henderson got gassed. And in 4 rounds of being gassed, Shields didn't finish him. So the people say that Shields is going to win this fight by submission.
Yeah. No, and Henderson, not to make excuses, I've said this before, he had a very tough weight cut, had issues with his back, no excuse, but like you say, had 4 rounds to finish him, unable to do it. Don't get me wrong, Jake Shields is without a doubt one of the top challengers, maybe the best challenger, 170, but GSP is just that good. What about Randy Couture? Is this pro wrestling man? Is he really retired or what? He told me 100% yes.
Well, I know he said 100% yes, but the reason he took this fight, he turned down a lot of fights. And apparently he was watching Lyoto, and it was just like his fight when his first comeback. When he watched Tim Sylvia, he goes, I can beat this guy. He said that about Lyoto. So yes, I'm sure right now he thinks I'm done. But if he has a good showing here, or if he beats him, there's going to be a guy a year from now that he watches on tape and he goes, I could beat this guy. That people were always like, they really need to build this show around Randy's retirement. If they want to sell this show, they really got to build it. And I thought, are people really going to believe Randy's going to retire? I don't see that as a big selling point, because I don't see your average person thinking, okay, this is really his last fight.
I think it's the venue, I think it's the record crowd, and the fact that GSP is headlining. Bryan Alvarez, he is the editor of the Figure 4 Weekly Newsletter. Check him out at f4wonline.com and wrestlingobserver.com. And of course, you're watching The Score.